Up they go. Barassi in there. Can't pull the mark down. Taken by Neil Compton. Compton kicks in towards goal for Melbourne.
It's a grand old flag. It's a high-flying flag. It's the emblem for
that pocket player will be the hero of all Melbourne tonight. If Melbourne take this premiership
It's
out.
the emblem of the team we love, the team of the red and the blue. Red and blue. Red and blue. Red and blue. Should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on the red and the blue. Keep your eye on the red and the blue.
The Melbourne Football Club's history embraces the very roots of our great game. It stretches back 141 years. It began less than quarter of a century after the first settlers set up their tents on the banks of the Yarra River. One of the 8 cornerstones of the Victorian Football League in 1897, Melbourne would win the first premiership of the 20th century. Produced champions like the first multiple winner of the Brownlow medal in Ivor Warne-Smith and 1926 premiership captain Bert Chadwick. It would build a fabulous reputation. Under Francis, Vane, Checker Hughes in the 30s, it would shrug off its nickname of the Fuchsias and become Demons. It became the only team to have won a hat-trick of premierships twice. It would embrace the coaching philosophy of Norm Smith and play in 11 successive final series. This is the story of Melbourne over the last 60 years, a video history of the oldest club in the game, recounted by the men who've made the Demons great. On September the 30th, 1939, just 27 days after the beginning of the Second World War, Melbourne and Collingwood resumed hostilities at the MCG. Melbourne had been eliminated in the preliminary finals of 1936 and 37, while Collingwood were nearing the end of a golden age that had seen them win 6 premierships and play off in 11 grand finals in 15 years. The crowd of 78,000 would see a different and more confident Melbourne lineup. This was a side that had topped 100 points in a record 15 games, a record 9 in a row, and under Checker Hughes had finished on top of the ladder.
Checker was a man's coach. He wasn't scientific. He was much the same as the Collingwood Jock McHale. He would demand you give of your best in endeavour. Skills, he'd put certain restrictions on you. And it was the fact that he was able to understand each player.
The captain was the delightfully skilled Alan LaFontaine.
My greatest memory is it was such a wonderful thing to break a drought of 13 years and to win our first premiership since 1926.
Melbourne had won the second semi-final over the Magpies by 14 points after a spirited third quarter revival. On grand final day, they would again come from behind. This was the Melbourne side of season 1939. Alan LaFontaine with the football. Wartime fighter hero Bluey Truscott on his right, and beside him, Norm Smith. Percy Beam second from the right, and Jack Mueller standing behind his skipper. Seated on the ground front left is Ron Barassi Sr. 4 members of this team, Truscott, Barassi, Sid Anderson and Harold Ball, would give their lives for their country in the years ahead. Beams, number 24, would be a star for the Redlegs that day. One of the most talented sportsmen of his time, he would play over 200 games for Melbourne and as a batsman, captain Victoria in the Sheffield Shield.
I rated Percy Beams as #1 rover in Australia. He was the most skillful, courageous, beautiful mark and kick, but just a little ruthless.
Former St Kilda backman Frank Roberts turned in a stunner, while Anderson and Wortman controlled the wings. Beams on the run as Melbourne thrashed Collingwood by 53 points. The final scoreline of 21-22-148 was a grand final record.
39, we won that easy, and we played Collingwood. Collingwood was a very ordinary side, and we won that easy in 39. 40 was a worry to us because that was when we played Richmond.
1940 was the roughest season in 2 decades. 47 players were reported, but that didn't stop Melbourne finishing on top of the ladder again. 16 scores over 100 points, the rest in the Demons' wake. The second semi-final was a roughhouse affair, Richmond's Jack Dyer on the rampage.
We were very worried whether Dyer would go berserk again. And we had a meeting, Checker called, I think there was about 8 of us that he called together. And we had a special meeting on the Thursday night before the team was selected and at the Port Phillip Hotel.
There was many hands put up to want to do the job. I know Wally Locke and Dick Hingston, but Checker thought it all over and he decided that O'Keefe would be the man.
Dyer remembers his shadow on this wet and wintry grand final day well.
They propped that O'Keefe, Jack O'Keefe, on me, and he followed me around everywhere. I couldn't move without him, and well, I complained bitterly to our captain and coach, but nothing
Well, whose
was
job
done.
was it to relieve you of that shadow?
Well, I think it was Bentley. He was captain and coach at the time, and he's a very strong sort of a customer, but I couldn't move because the umpire had cautioned me about 4 times in 4 minutes, so it was just a matter of if I do anything wrong, I'm gone.
The ploy worked to perfection. Dyer was no threat. At full forward, Norm Smith kicked a grand final record 7 goals. At centre-half forward, Ron Baggett was devastating, while Beams was the best rover on the ground. Melbourne by 39 points.
The most unselfish player that I've ever had anything to do with. He'd make opportunities for everyone in the team, and at the detriment to himself. He was a finished player. He wasn't showy by any means, but he was tremendously effective.
In 1941, Melbourne would complete their hat-trick of premierships, defeating Dick Reynolds' Bombers by 29 points. LaFontaine would step down as captain, Hughes as coach.
Checker, I would think, without having any facts to back it up, he had the hotel there at Richmond, the Cricketers' Arms, and I think the staff problem was the factor that decided he'd have to give way to looking after his interests rather than the football club.
As the country struggled in those war years, Beams was called before Football Club chairman Joe Blair and was appointed captain coach.
I never applied for the coaching job. It was just told to me by Joe Blair. He called me in the office one day and said, "You're coaching Melbourne next this year," and he said, "We'll pay you £4, which is equal to $8 coaching fee."
In May 1942, squadron leader Bluey Truscott returned, the winner of the DFCN bar and one of the country's most famous wartime fighter pilots. He would turn out for 1 game and led the side out against Richmond. Tragically, he would be killed less than a year later while on a flying exercise in Western Australia at the age of 25. His name is honoured to this day. The Bluey Truscott Cup is awarded annually to the club's best and fairest player.
training, we trained at the Albert ground because we had no ground of our own that had been taken over by Richmond. We had to go taken over by the Army and the American force. So we had to share with Richmond, and we were poor relations as far as Richmond were concerned at that stage. And it was a problem of getting players to the ground in time to train, and a big crowd would be, say, about 8 or 10. That's all we'd have on for training nights.
In 1946, Don Cordner had emulated dual winner Ivor Warne-Smith by winning the first post-war Brownlow medal by a vote from Carlton's Jack Howell and Richmond's Bill Morris. Norm Smith and Dick Reynolds tossed the coin on Grand Final Day 1946. The Demons, once again under coach Checker Hughes, had made a late charge at the fore, winning 10 of their last 11 games. It was a sensational opening, 15 goals scored in the first quarter, 8 by the Demons. But a hard finals campaign had taken its toll. After wins over Footscray and Collingwood, Melbourne ran out of legs. In 20 minutes of the third term, Essendon kicked 11 goals, the Bombers by 63 points. At the age of 25, Fred Fanning decided to go to the bush as playing coach. He had 3 times been the VFL leading goal kicker, and in 1947 kicked the club record 97 goals, including the VFL record of 18 goals against St Kilda in his last game. In 1998, the MCC hosted a luncheon for the survivors of the 1948 Grand Final campaign, the Essendon and Melbourne champions who figured in one of the greatest final series in football history.
We had already played Essendon 3 times, and we had been soundly defeated each time. I said to Dick, "This is our last shot at you, Dick." And Dick said, and I kid you not, "Unless it's a draw, Donald, unless it's a draw."
Melbourne had lost the second semi-final to the Bombers, but then Checker Hughes made his biggest gamble. He recalled 32-year-old veteran Jack Mueller from the seconds. Many good judges rate him the greatest big game player of all time.
That he had 2 games left in him. But with the drawn grand final, he had to play 3. But Jack rose to it. He was magnificent.
I thought Mueller could have been a better player than what he was. I didn't think that Jack really sacrificed himself enough for the team. But as a brilliant individual, he was certainly outstanding.
Smith and Mueller destroyed Collingwood in the preliminary final, Mueller kicking 8 from the forward pocket. Smith, the decoy at full forward, kicking 6. Melbourne home by 65 points. On October the 2nd, 1948, Mueller did it again in the grand final. He would kick 6, but the talking point was not so much Big Jack's accuracy, but Essendon's shocking inaccuracy. The Bombers kicked 7-27. The match would end with scores level, the first grand final draw in history.
That was a nightmare, 7-27. Look, I don't think I slept for about 6 weeks after that. And really, all I can see, that 7-27.
And what happened in the replay, because you were still favoured to win, they got away with a 6-goal first quarter.
Yes. No, I think the strain kept in on us, and the disappointment of 7-27 the week before with Melbourne. They started off that well, they caught us unawares, and they went on, and we plodded on. I suppose to win 1 out of about 4, they had to do it.
In that year, Essendon played Melbourne 5 times, and I think that is the only time, in fact, I'm sure that's the only time 2 teams have played each other 5 times. And also Melbourne that year was the first time that any team had played 23 games.
A week later, 52,000 saw Melbourne kick 6 first quarter goals to 0 and set up a 39-point win. Mueller kicked 6 to take his tally to 20 goals in 3 finals. It would be Norm Smith's last game, with Hughes resigning. The great forward applied for the coaching job, but in a split decision, it would go to Alan LaFontaine. Disappointed, Smith went to Fitzroy as playing coach. The 35-year-old Mueller would return to the final scene one more time, in 1950, but this time there would be no miracles, as Melbourne lost the first semi-final to Geelong. Mueller would retire after a club record 216 games. The Cordner name is one of the most revered at Melbourne. From brothers Harry in 1903 and Edward Sr. in 1905, through to David in the mid-80s, it was a footballing dynasty. Ted's four sons, Don, Dennis, John and Ted, would all play for the Redlegs in the 40s and 50s. After the 1950 first semi-final loss to Geelong, Don would retire. That day, Dr. Don had delivered a baby at Diamond Creek and barely arrived at the MCG in time to play. Cordner had played 166 games, won the 1946 Brownlow medal and captained the side to the 1948 premiership. The veterans Albie Rodder, Max Spittle, Billy Dean, Stan Rule and Shane McGrath would retire. McGrath replaced as captain by another of the Cordners, the talented ruck star Dennis, who would lead the side into the 1951 season. The recruiting process was on in earnest.
LaFonte started in 1951. We played 19 first-year players in 1951 and won the Wooden Spoon, and LaFontaine finished. Reformations never get their due reward. Jim Cardwell was secretary then, that was his first year too. But then Norman came back and he nurtured these players and we got a few more. But it really started in 1951. We were in the finals in 50 with all the pre-war players. Mueller came back and Cole McLean, Shane McGrath, and he cleaned them all out. That's where it started from.
Norm Smith returned from Fitzroy as coach in 1952. Jim Cardwell had taken over as secretary and former champion Albert Chadwick was chairman. The rebuilding process started by LaFontaine was in full swing. It would be revolutionary. 17 players would make their debuts in 1953. Names like Marquis, Williams, Barassi, Case and Frank Bluey Adams.
I can always remember in the early days, sort of the dinners after the game, that there would be so much soft drink on the table, it would be unbelievable because there's so many of the younger players didn't drink, you know, the Braces and what have you, and the Dixons and etc. And by all of us coming to the club at the same time, it just built a terrific bond, and I think that served us well in years to come.
Well, he came up and played a few games and he didn't really set the world on fire, and I can't remember exactly where he played, probably half-back flank, half-forward flank, but he didn't seem to do anything of note. And then it was only by sheer, well, Norm Smith's genius that he decided that because Dennis Cordner was so dominant in the ruck, he could afford to have someone running along beside him. They call it ruck roving, but he just sent Bressy out to follow Dennis around, and that's how it evolved, really.
A year later, the next batch included Laurie Mithen, Big Bob Johnson, whose father had played in the 20s, Ian Tiger Ridley and Brian Dixon.
As a kid, I hated South Melbourne. If you lived in Port Melbourne, you hated South, and I put in clearance applications to go to Melbourne, but they were knocked back, and so I had to play with South.
In 1954, Jeff Collins took over the captaincy. He'd served in the Air Force in the Korean War and, like Johnson, was the son of a former Melbourne Premiership player of 1926. Smith had turned the club around. He had the players' undivided attention.
He was the greatest tactician I've ever seen. The way he played the game, he tried to instill it into the players. I never at any time in the years I had with Norm, heard him ask for a player to go out and do something to another player. Not even just, you know, only stay close, that's the only thing. But never at any time did he go out. But if a player did do it, he wouldn't discipline him for doing it.
I've found on a few occasions that, you know, Smithy could make a criticism of a player and that was it, but if you made the same criticism of that player to Smithy, you in turn got verbally belted up.
Smithy was, as Terry Gleason said, he's hard and just. Hard and just but hey, he was hard, but he was just a bloody good bloke too.
The overall thought I've got of Norman Smith is the amount of respect that man commanded. It was absolutely staggering, and I think there was a reason there, and the reason was that there wouldn't have been anything that Norman Smith wouldn't have asked you to have done that he wouldn't have been prepared to do himself had he been playing, and that sort of came across time and time again. And the other point was that any decision that Norman Smith made was always in the best interest of the Melbourne Football Club. I couldn't speak highly of that man, not only as a coach, but as an individual.
Grand Final Day 1954, Melbourne and Footscray in front of 80,000 at the MCG. The Bulldogs under Charlie Sutton out for their first flag. Melbourne had finished fourth, beat North Melbourne by 5 goals in the first semi and Geelong in the preliminary final.
We were very young. We came from second last to be in the finals. We had to play 3 finals. It was 4 in those days, if you remember. Almost every year, 1 or 2 won the premiership. We were exhausted in the grand final, but we'd done a wonderful job to come from second last to play off.
We got off to a very poor start for the simple reason we had to play the previous week in a very heavy ground, and I can remember relating this to years later. On the Thursday night before the grand final, most of the guys couldn't kick the ball more than 30 yards. They were physically gone. So when we got to the grand final, our first quarter was a disaster. Footscray jumped us. Charlie Sutton, as you've probably heard the story, said he'd look after the Melbourne players while the rest of the team played football. He threw his weight around and he had a go at various guys. And that unsettled us. We couldn't get going, and at quarter time we were 5 or 6 goals behind. We never caught up, but there was good signs there the way we played after quarter time.
In 1955, Noel McMahon accepted the captaincy. It would be the beginning of 3 magnificent seasons in which Melbourne totally dominated the competition. In round 7 at the Lake Oval, Melbourne trailed South Melbourne by 5 goals into time on.
Greatest game I've ever played in. We won by 2 points. We never played well at South Melbourne. They were always a pretty physical side, and they matched us with Taylors and Cleggs and Cater and those blokes. And they kicked a goal right on time on. I think it put them 5 goals in front. Mickey Simon was on a half-forward flank, and Billy Gunner, I was playing on, had absolutely killed me. Billy Gunner I could never beat. He was a wonderful player. And they were kissing each other, and Dennis Gordon came to me and he said, "Macca, let's give them one more twitch. Come to the ruck with me." And he's hit the ball down to that lake end so far. Dick Atkinson, who was on the field with broken ribs, kicked a goal. Terry Gleeson kicked a goal, and I kicked it, and Bob Johnson kicked a goal. And we've got up. It's unbelievable.
Melbourne finished on top of the ladder, winning 15 of 18 games and beat Collingwood in a wet, low-scoring second semi-final. The grand final started sensationally when McMahon flattened Collingwood hero Bobby Rose. Erratic kicking had plagued Melbourne during the season and would cause bother this day too. But Melbourne was far too polished. In the dying minutes, a huge controversy. Frank Adams had dashed off the bench to replace the injured Jeff Case. He didn't even see Magpie star Des Healy. Their sickening collision left them both unconscious.
He was credited with a 9.3 100-yard dash. That's how quick blue he was, and he was enormously strong. I suppose the sensation he created with the Healy-Adams collision in the 1955 grand final just showed the force of the man.
I started in, 1954 and broke down in 1961, so I didn't have a lot of opportunity, but I was a very fortunate person to be able to be part of such a great group of players, led by, of course, Norm Smith, who was just the man.
In 1956, Melbourne was the sporting capital of the world. A record crowd of 115,000 was on hand for the VFL Grand Final, the prelude to the Olympic Games. So great was the interest in the game that patrons were allowed onto the arena, hugging the boundary line. Some even sat on the grandstand roof.
You had that thought as you were chasing the ball towards the boundary that you couldn't very well slow down because that's against the principles of Norm Smith. You had to run, flat out at every ball. And so you just kept going and fell into the crowd.
Players came on through specially decorated banners. In all his years as coach, Norm Smith never had a full forward who would kick more than 60 goals. In Big Bob Johnson and Athol Webb, he'd reconstructed the formula that had worked so well with Jack Mueller and himself all those years earlier.
On Collingwood's later 18, and by the third quarter, the Demons hold a commanding lead. Here's another opportunity for the Demons, and Big Bob Johnson makes no mistake.
Well, Athol Webb, he'd lead out, and I'd fall in behind him all the time. If they couldn't find Athol, they shot it up to me. But Athol then, again, he'd come back through the front of the pack and he'd take the chips off the front of the pack. Webb was a great player and had a lot of pace. And he was a vigorous sort of a coot too.
This would be McMahon's last year as captain, his side at the very peak of their form.
When we went out onto the ground, in all the games that I played in, it was never would we win or would we lose. It was how much will we win by.
I think 56 is the best side I've ever seen, because I'm very, very biased. Of course, 6 of us retired, and 57 they won the premiership again. And there was our best player, Dennis Cordner, our best and fairest for 2 premiership years, Stewie Spencer, the captain, and Kenny Melville's vice-captain. We all retired. That's the depth of the club at that stage.
Noel McMahon, the captain, a great captain, he retired. Ralph Lane, a winger. Dennis Cordner, a superb ruckman. Stuart Spencer, prematurely left. He'd married a Tasmanian girl, Faye, and she eventually got her way. I think she regrets it now. But Stewie left at the prime, I think he was the best rover in Australia when he left.
It would be a premiership send-off. John Beckwith, the dapper and highly efficient back pocket specialist, would take over as captain from McMahon.
Just at that time, probably John Beckwith was probably the best player that the club had, and that often was the reason why captains were picked, because they were the best player.
His deputy would be Ron Barassi. Barassi had been part of Melbourne all his life. His father had played alongside Norm Smith before losing his life at Tobruk. From 17 to 21, the young Ron Barassi would live with Norm and Marge Smith. Moulded into the game's most inspirational ruck rover, he was at his most telling in the mid to late 50s, but he got no special favours from the coach.
Hardest on brass of all the players, like, you know, he wasn't, we had a nickname for him, which I can't say over on a tape, but he was particularly hard on Ronnie, I thought, than anybody else. But he was fair in the respect that he treated everybody the same. He had no favourites. Smithy never played favourites.
One of, if not the most determined person that I've ever met, whether it was on a football field or off the football field. Like after a game of footy in our day, you'd play a game of table tennis. Well, Barassi just would not be beaten. And he would work and work and work until he won. And the same on a football field. I don't think that Ron had the greatest... I don't think he had the abilities of a Robert Flower. But he was a very, very, very determined man to succeed at what he was doing. He just wanted to win.
In 1957, the last quarters of some matches were televised for the first time. This is one of the earliest recordings. Former Australian cricket captain Ian Johnson calling the action at the round 11 game between Melbourne and Footscray.
Out from goal and as near as you could possibly get to being directly in front. He's in line with the goal post, only 12 yards out from goals. Terry Gleeson, the big Melbourne ruckman. And that was a very quick answer to Footscray's goal. And the ball is driven out towards the Melbourne half-forward flank position. That's where it's going to be thrown in. 12-13-85 Melbourne to 5-7-37 Footscray. And from the throw in there as Westcott drives it out, but Barassi of Melbourne comes in to get the ball. He turns onto his left foot. He drives up further on the half-forward flank position. And the chance now for Adams of Melbourne. He's 60 yards out for goal. He drives across to Webb. And Webb it is who marks the ball some 45 yards out from goals. His kick takes it right up into the goal square. Fenton Smith rises for the mark, but it's another behind the Melbourne. Stocksman's kick goes back to the centre half-back position where Gilmore rises for the mark, and he gets the mark. He plays on, he kicks out over the centre line, down towards a half-forward wing position, and that's John Lord of Melbourne, known as Television Lord, they tell me, coming into it again, but this time Lord has been starring for the 4 quarters of this match, and not as has been customary only for the last quarter. Lord has a ball just short of the centre of the ground.
Melbourne had 7 21-year-olds who'd already played in 3 successive grand finals. The power side was preparing for a mighty dynasty. After finishing a game and a half clear on top of the ladder in 57, Melbourne lost the second semi-final to Essendon, the Bombers kicking 9 of their 12 goals in an explosive second quarter.
Johnny Lord had been best on the ground in the reserves premiership the previous year at centre half back. He suddenly slotted into centre half back in the seniors. We had some new players coming in. Dick Fenton-Smith was one, and we replaced these guys pretty adequately, and so we the confidence from the previous year was there. We kept playing well, and we got to the finals and we had a hell of a setback. We had a setback in the second semi-final, and we got beaten by Essendon, which was a hell of a surprise, and I think that was the best thing that ever happened, because suddenly we had to regroup. We weren't the favourites, and we had to get on and beat Hawthorn in the preliminary final, in which we did, and then we faced up to Essendon again, and this time Brass had a magnificent start. He kicked 3 goals in the first quarter, and we jumped them, and we went on with the game. Well, in 57 I was captain, and I swapped Guernseys with Jack Clark, and I didn't have time to put my Jack Clark's Guernsey on, and here I am in the photos without a Guernsey at all, and it doesn't look too good on the mantelpiece with a skinny-faced, ribbed kid, being carried off the ground, and that was probably a disappointment.
Melbourne, the Demons, are first out, led by John Beckwith and Ron Barassi. They are an all-conquering side, and their record over the past few seasons has been phenomenal.
Only Collingwood had won 4 premierships in a row, half a century earlier. Melbourne was poised to equal that famed record in 1958, the centenary year of Australian football. Melbourne finished 3 games clear on top of the ladder. Collingwood were well beaten in the second semi-final and would get another chance at the Demons on grand final day. In an amazing start to the day, the Sun had published the players' numbers. The VFL insisted they change Guernsey numbers for the match. Barassi, for example, trading the famous number 31 for number 2. In heavy conditions, Melbourne got away to an early lead. Wiedemann, the Collingwood skipper, and hooker Harrison, who'd been charged with tagging Barassi, were hell-bent on aggression. Melbourne players responded, and while the key Magpie duo were doing their thing, the rest of the team started playing good football and skipped away to a handy lead.
Well, my summary of that awful day in 58 was that half of us wanted to fight and the other half scribbed it, or looked as though they'd scribbed it anyway. Now, you can't ever succeed in a team game unless you're all doing the same sort of thing. And I reckon if we'd been that way united, well, we would have won, because there's no doubt in my mind that we are the best team on the year.
And now you can watch closely as Melbourne's diminutive rover, Ian Ridley, is floored by Collingwood's Bill Sarong.
Bill Sarong fixed me right up, but thinking back on that, I think it was our own fault. It was probably the best side we had, actually, 58.
They were a much better side. They were they beat us by some 10 goals in the second semi-final to win. Then we played North Melbourne and had to front them up again. Deep down in my own heart, I knew we couldn't beat them. There was no hope in the world of beating them. And so you went out there, and I always had I used to sit in the back row when Fonskine got up and gave a talk about tradition of Collingwood and they would achieve our 4 premierships in a row. But I knew what I had to do in sitting on the back row in the dressing room there, that you knew the danger players, the Mithens, Barassi, Skilton, Big Bob Johnson, those sort of players that they were match winners, and they had plenty of them. They could win a game in 1 quarter, and you know, when we came in at half time, we were 5 points in front at half time. Well, I was coming up the race and Fonskine was standing at the top of the race there, and he said, "Murray, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it." You know, it was unbelievable to be in front, and then of course we went on and won by 3 goals in the finish.
Melbourne was goalless in the 3rd term. Collingwood 5 goals ahead at the last break. Smith looked concerned as he tried desperately to rouse his players. Collingwood under Fonskine were all but home. In the last quarter, Melbourne would hold Collingwood goalless, but it would not be enough.
And Collingwood reaping the benefits of their most determined play. Dixon, usually number 9, tries a drop kick, one of the few we've seen today, and that's Barassi chipping right in front of Rose. Had they collided, they both would have been out for 6 months. Barassi between the half and full forward lines. He's 50 yards out from goal. His kick is going into the goal square. And a kick through. That's a goal. Been allowed to Crompton. Well, you've got to take your hat off to these Magpies. Fantastic. They lost 3 of their last 4, if you don't count last week's game. Still held on to 2nd place, more by a miracle than anything else, as their own supporters will agree. And now, after being down throughout the finals and having to come out for 3 hard games in a row, they've bobbed up to win the grand final. Fenton Smith. This is Ken Turner. Been one of Collingwood's good players again today. He's had a great season. Again, a free kick in the pack to Peter Marquis. "29 minutes gone. There's the siren. The Magpies have done it. The last time was 1953. They've saved their proud record of 4 straight wins. Thorold Merritt and Bennett, the 2 Rovers who played such a great part in the win too. Sign of delirious excitement.
I think everybody took it personally. Like I know I felt that way about it, because it meant a heck of a lot to get that 4 in a row, and it just didn't happen. No, I think there was a lot of that in it. And I think we were definitely conned in the 58. Should never have ever lost it.
For the 5th year in a row, Melbourne would finish on top of the ladder in 1959, and for the 2nd time in 3 would face Essendon for the premiership. 103,000 saw Barassi steal the initiative from the Bombers with 3 goals in 7 minutes. It would be a tour de force from the Melbourne vice-captain and help his side to a 6-goal victory.
BOG that day, yeah. And particularly, I thought from half forward. I think a lot of people have talked over the years what a great ruck rover Brass was. I always believe he was the best forward pocket I've ever seen, because he did his best things between the full forward line and the half forward line.
The VFL had decided to finally produce a Premiership Cup. John Beckwith would be the first captain to receive it.
I had instructions at the end of the game. I had to go around and find this pathway up, and the governor, Princess Alexander, was there with the governor, and I had to, you know, go up into the middle of the crowd to get this cup and then come back onto the ground, which had never been done before, and then to stand there and, like they do in the soccer at Wembley, and hold the cup up in front of 100,000 people was, you know, just a dream come true.
Prior to the 1960 season, Melbourne was saddened by the passing of Ivor Warne Smith. The 62-year-old Gallipoli veteran was the first man to win dual Brownlow medals. He'd been captain and coach and Smith's chairman of selectors. He was a great Melbourne man. Barassi would replace Beckwith as captain. Melbourne had won through to the 1960 Grand Final and would face Collingwood for the 4th time in 6 years. Like 58, it was wet and miserable. But this time there would be no mistakes. Melbourne would restrict Collingwood to 2 goals.
I can remember parking the car and walking through the car park on the way to the dressing rooms that day, and the heavens opened up and the rain came down, and I can remember thinking to myself, gee, these conditions are exactly the same as 1958, and I'm quite sure the Collingwood team, once the heavens opened and the rain came down, they would have thought, you beauty, this is a very good omen. But I have never in my life played in a side that was so focused as that side was that day. It was absolutely unbelievable. There was no indiscretions, there was nothing toward, there were no punches thrown, just every player had just a burning desire. And I think because the conditions sort of mirrored the ones we had in 58, what we were looking for was a chance in some small way to redeem ourselves for 1958. And of course Collingwood, you know, wrote themselves into the record books with the lowest grand final score of 2-2.
It's Bob Johnson in the ruck for Melbourne. He taps down nicely to Dixon, who handballs out nicely to Mithun, and Mithun's kick goes up onto the half-forward flank where it's Ridley in front, but Reeves spoiled him nicely. This time it's Mick Toomey. Toomey hooks it over, but it's Dixon to take the mark, and he plays on. His kick goes down onto the half-forward flank, over the back, where it's Roweth leading in the race, the ball well in front. His left foot's a beauty. It's gone right through the middle. Well, there's Roweth. A goal for Melbourne. That's
takes Melbourne score on to 8 goals, 12 behind, 60 points. Collingwood 2-1-13.
Oh, a little handball to Thripp, but Thripp was right in underneath Laidlaw and had very little time. His kick right over on the outer wing position where it's Keneally. Oh, just taps it over towards Tunbridge. Tunbridge way out on his own. This boy will show you what to do with it with a yard start. He just screws it off the side of his foot to Barassi in the forward pocket. So easy for Melbourne at this stage. Barassi would be about 40 yards out on his wrong side, but not on a particularly acute angle. And there goes the siren to end what has been a disappointing game, with Melbourne taking out the premiership for 1960 with a convincing victory. 8 goals, 14, 62 points to Collingwood, 2 goals, 2, 14 points.
Ron Barassi on hand to accept the Premiership Cup. And soon afterwards, Big Bob Johnson made one of those decisions he still regrets.
What was his name? Mick Grambo. Mick Grambo went coaching up in Ganmain. And I read about Mick. He got £1,000, I think it was, and he got a cow. And I thought, if Mick can get £1,000 and a cow, I can get £1,500, and that's better than getting a bloody cow. So I went and I got £1,500. That was the reason why I went. I'm now sorry. You know, you look back on it and you say, well, yeah, I am sorry that I went, because Smithy, you know, Smithy got us together socially. He got the love of the club into us, and mate, we were successful because of Norm Smith.
Memories of Melbourne's finals campaigns of the early 60s tend to be overshadowed by the triumphs of the years that preceded them. In 1961, they'd finished second on the ladder and lost in successive finals to Hawthorn and Footscray. In 1962, they would finish third on the ladder and meet Carlton in the first semi-final.
Norm Smith, Doyen coach, heading up the most powerful football machine in league history.
Lay gets the ball, kicks it wide towards the centre wing position, and up for it was Hasselman. The ball was knocked away, picked up by Landman up towards the forward line for Melbourne. Mithun has the ball, being chased by Barry. He eludes him, kicks it up towards the forward line. It's going towards Byers and Silvani. Silvani's got too much pace for Byers, but it has gone through for 1 point before Silvani could stop it from crossing that line. And Melbourne are 11 goals 10, leading Carlton 10 goals 8. And that is a good decision from umpire Swab.
Barassi's coming off. Bad blow for Melbourne. Golly, how they go through the rest of the finals matches if they're going to be without him.
Well, I feel that Barassi must be really hurt to come on his own initiative. He called for the trainer to bring the other player on, And Barassi must not like coming off because he's too great a team man.
It's 14 minutes into the final quarter.
Collis it is for Carlton, and Collis has the ball, kicks it with a lovely drop kick towards the full forward position, and has the free kick that could win the game. It's going to be a free kick to the Carlton player. It is John Nichols. Here's Nichols about to run in to kick it now. Trevor Johnson on his mark. A score will put them in front. It's a punt kick. It's going to be a score. It doesn't matter what it is, but Carlton are in front by 1 point. 11 goals 11 to 11 goals 10. How long have we been playing?
A decision against Laurie Mithen late in the game stunned Demon officials. Seconds later, the siren sounded. Carlton home by 2 points.
Still 2 points in Carlton's favour. 11-12 to 11-10 as Miller gets his second kick and boots it into the centre of the ground. That was a good kick. Look at the pack. Carlton swamping the back line. Picked up by Nielsen. Gives it to Hesseman. Gives it to Dixon. Come on, Melbourne. They're going nicely to Adams. Adams on the forward line. Boots it into the goal square. Up they go. Is that Tunbridge's mark or is it not? Anderson pounces on him. Puts him in an Indian deathlock. And it's anybody's guess what's going on from here. Mithen, the vice captain, runs up with the ball. Boots it through. What's the umpire's decision? No score there. The ball is coming back.
Oh, he's going to give a free kick.
Well, your guess is as good as mine. The players don't even seem to know whose kick it's going to be. Nichols comes in and talks to the umpire. Carlton are really swamping that back line. So it's going to be a bounce-up. Umpire Swap is going to bounce it 15 yards from goal. Byers goes up, knocks it down. Tassie Johnson has hold of it, tries to break his way out of the pack. Peter Barry kicks it back towards John Nichols. Down goes Tassie Johnson after grabbing the ball, and it'll be another bounce-up, and we've had 6 minutes of time on. Carlton still 2 points in front as Byers knocks it out there wide towards his man. Nielsen can't get rid of it. The siren's gone. Melbourne are beaten, and Carlton win the day.
Melbourne could hardly put a foot wrong through the 1963 season. For the second time in a decade, they'd lost to South Melbourne at the Lakeside Oval, but then went on a rampage. No one was safe. Over the next 12 weeks, they would record 11 wins. They'd hold Ted Whitten's Bulldogs to 3 goals, the Dogs' worst performance in 38 years. A week later, it was the turn of St Kilda. The Saints, who'd upset Melbourne in the first round of the season as they introduced young Carl Ditterich, were just no match. This day at the MCG, they could kick only 5 goals for the afternoon. Melbourne would win by 10.
And he's only on a slight angle. Burke has already kicked 2. This could be his 3rd coming up. It looks straight from here. It is. It's straight through the middle, and that makes Melbourne 14-13. St Kilda 5-9, and as I said, that was the 3rd goal coming up for Burke, and they've really played well, this Melbourne side.
A loss to Hawthorn in round 14 saw swift retribution a week later. In fact, for many weeks to come. Poor old Essendon, the reigning premiers, were flogged at the MCG. This was a Melbourne team on fire.
He drives it up towards the full forward position, looking for Burke. Doran's in front, coming over the back is Bagg, and umpire Nunn is going to pay the mark to Bagg. David Shaw and Paul Doran hotly contesting the decision, but it is a mark to Barry Bagg.
Melbourne 26 points in front, and a chance to be 32 as Vagg's drop punt kick goes dangerously close to a goal. It is a goal, and Melbourne can do nothing wrong today. A goal to Barry Vagg.
Brown, a new player for Essendon, and doing quite well because he's up against a very talented player in Dixon. There's them throw-in. Timms at the back, knocks it down, but it's picked up by Emsley. Gives it across to Tassie Johnson. Tassie Johnson slams for the goal. And how far, Melbourne? 16 goals, 6. Umpire Nunn bounces the ball. We see ball knocked by McKenzie. Barassi handballs it out to the open spaces. It's going towards Groom. Groom gives it across to Adams, and Melbourne are coming again. Adams kicked it into the goal square. The ball is bouncing towards Keneally. Can he get there? 17 goals, 6 to 10-10.
50 yards from goal. Short passes, and out comes Townsend to take the mark. Clark and McKenzie combined to put him in a half Nelson and a wrist lock, but he's got to get up and take the kick. Clark is spoken to by umpire Nunn. Townsend 30 yards from goal. Oh, it's another goal to Melbourne. 18 goals, 6.
3 goals for every behind kicked.
Essendon down by 51 points. Fitzroy a week later by 96. Collingwood by 61, and on it went. In round 17 at Punt Road, Melbourne would easily account for Richmond by 8 goals. Along the way, Ron Barassi would be reported for striking Roger Dean. This was headline news. The captain of Melbourne, the biggest name in football, was suspended for 4 matches. He would not play for Melbourne in the final series.
Rankled with me for a long, long while. So probably I'm not a bitter type person, thankfully, but if I was, that'd be number 1 on the list, because we weren't allowed to present evidence which would have at least thrown doubt on the thing, and if in doubt, you might get out. Apart from not being allowed to produce even a still photo. I mean, the still photo showed Roger on the ground with the ball. Now, you don't get a whack of the severity that the umpire claimed it was in the face and still hold on to the ball. Now, come on.
I think Ron's got a bit of dementia, I think, or something's got a problem somewhere, because he definitely hit me, and that's it.
A very good act by Roger Dean. And the thing that surprised me at the end of the day when it did go to the tribunal, the entire football knew of Roger's acting ability. They really did. And for Brass to get 4 weeks for that, when in my opinion there was an opportunity for him actually to get off, was just absolutely unbelievable.
Frank Adams would lead Melbourne onto the MCG for the finals. They'd beaten St Kilda in the first semi and now faced Hawthorn in the preliminary final, with Barassi looking on. In the most even season since the Page Final Series was introduced in 1931, half a game separated the top 5 sides. They all won 13 games. The Demons would go down by 7 points and miss the chance to play Geelong for the flag, a team they'd beaten by 8 goals in round 8 and had defeated in 9 of their previous 10 meetings. There would be one last chance for redemption for the Demons of '63. An end-of-season trip of gigantic magnitude for the time had been arranged. Melbourne and Geelong would travel to the United States and play 2 exhibition games. Geelong had advertised the fact that they would be the first Australian team to visit the USA. You can imagine the surprise when they arrived and found the Melbourne boys already well in place. Even the skipper had the local customs down pat. It would signal the beginning of a fortnight of fierce rivalry. While the players had hoped to lap up the sun on Waikiki Beach, Norm Smith had other ideas. This was the chance to prove just which was the outstanding team of the season, even if it was to be proved in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
Norm was not alone in that. It sounds very arrogant, but we knew we were a better side. We'd thrashed them by about 6 or 7 goals, I think 3 or 4 weeks before the finals started. What people don't remember about that year is that Geelong at that period in time, they always used to beat Hawthorn for some unknown reason. They played Hawthorn in the last match of the season to get in the finals. They played Hawthorn the next game, 2 weeks later, in the second semi-final. Hawthorn again. They win. They play Hawthorn again. So they've played Hawthorn, their favourite side, 3 times in a row in 5 weeks. So we didn't take a notice of them winning the premiership. We actually thought we were a better side, and we had a bit of pleasure. You can't prove anything like that again because you don't get the chance. But we did beat them twice overseas.
I would say just about out of 15 nights away, probably we had curfews on 13 nights because Norm had us training, had us playing hard, and 2 nights before the game, righto fellas, early to bed. And that was just the competitive side of Norm. He wanted to prove himself that, yeah, we really were the best side.
Tours to Hickam Air Force Base were just a sidelight for Smith as he focused on the job ahead. Geelong coach Bob Davis remembers just how tough the games were. Fair dinkum, he said. Melbourne would win a tight and tough encounter at the university in front of a slightly incredulous Honolulu crowd. Then the race was on. Melbourne changed its airline bookings to ensure that it would be the first team onto the mainland. At Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, the Demons won again. A tough, spiteful match marred by fights. But Smith had proved his point. In 1964, half a game separated the first 5 teams. So even was the competition that Hasseman clinched the second last game of the season with a goal against Hawthorn. The Hawks finished out of the 4 on percentage, Melbourne on top of the ladder after that one heart-stopping win in its last 3 games. Melbourne steamrolled Collingwood in the second semi-final, kicking 17 goals to 4 after quarter time, and the old foes would meet again on grand final day.
Oh, I think Melbourne broke a lot of rules. I think if you're got pretty good 18 and you're well managed and well coached and you really have a go, I mean, you're going to have a chance no matter if you are a bit weak here and there or not as strong as one would like to be here and there. I mean, Melbourne never had a named full forward in the whole of that period.
His kick is flicked out to Henderson, who handballs to Dalton. Dalton sends on to Watt, but the pass is too strong, allowing Melbourne to regain possession. Williams lands the ball with Hasseman, who scores the first goal since 8 minutes after the start of play. From the bounce, Collingwood again wins the ruck, but poor direction robs them of the advantage, and Dixon sends the Demons away again. Williams gathers and drives 50 yards downfield into the safe hands of Lord. Lord's kick is never in doubt. Waters' kick lands in front of the post for Graham to snap up. His hooking kick from the difficult angle puts the Magpies in front in the time-on period. Now the Collingwood streamers are waving in sheer delight as the Magpies lead at half-time, 5-9-39 to Melbourne's 5-7-37. The MCG is seen at its best, and the close game is really giving the crowd its money's worth with even better to come. McLean's mark saves a dangerous situation for the Magpies. But the Demons are determined, and Townsend makes no mistake, kicking his 3rd goal.
It would be Melbourne's 8th grand final under Norm Smith since 1954, and without doubt the most thrilling. This was a side that may have lacked the total dominance of the mid-50s. It relied on a shortish ruckman named Graham Wise and an old and vastly experienced core of players led by Brian Dixon, Bluey Adams, Don Williams and Barassi. At 3/4 time, Melbourne led by 11 points in a low-scoring game in front of 102,000. The last quarter was a beauty.
Picked up by Graham, his hand pass is misdirected, but luckily goes out to Waters. He's run down by Rowan, who upsets his kick. The ball has gone to the centre wing. Crumpton jumps onto the ball. Tubman frantically kicks it forward to Gabba, who's 30 yards out his own. The big 17-stone Collingwood captain goes for a run. He'll get to the goals on his own. It's a goal! We have been playing for 23.5 minutes into the last quarter. Norm Smith, the man without the hat, is the coach, a worried coach of the Melbourne side. They trail by 2 points as McLean gets set to kick the ball out for Collingwood.
There's the drop kick by McLean to the half-back line, and Dixon flies to take the mark. Dixon, a stalwart of the Melbourne team for many years, has played well today. On the half-forward line, he sends it forward. Up they go. Barassi in there. Can't pull the mark down. Taken by Neil Compton. Compton kicks in towards goal for Melbourne.
Goal to equal Gavelich's performance, and the stadium's gone crazy.
Neil Compton, a back pocket player, will be the hero of all Melbourne tonight. if Melbourne take this premiership out. A goal from a back pocket player is unheard of.
Melbourne, 4 points in front, have everything in their favour. The ball is on their scoring zone at the moment. Picked up by Reeves. Collingwood coming to attack the ball on the half-forward line. Henderson gives it to Dalton. Collingwood forcing it forward. Dalton has the ball. Kicks it in. Picked up by Ian Graham. He's tackled. Graham is met by 3 Melbourne players. It's in front of the Collingwood goal. What a finish. What a game. It's all over. It's all over. Melbourne premiers for 1964. John Henderson, the Collingwood player, exhausted. Norm Smith, Melbourne coach. Players from both teams congratulating each other. And what a terrific finish to the 64 Grand Final.
Terrific, fantastic. How else could you describe it?
All the players in the team, with the possible exception of Hassaman, he was the best one for the ball to go to if you wanted someone to remain cool, take the ball cleanly, one grab, and kick it straight with an absolute minimum of time. And that was the situation, and so I went to him.
I'm sure today that we have seen one of the greatest spectacles of our Australian games ever played on this ground.
It wasn't as special as it should have been because I'd played one of the worst finals games ever. And I was still coming to terms with that. I mean, I'm just so thankful we won because, I mean, it's very bad to play a bad game, but to play a poor game and lose would be even worse. So at least we won.
Norm Smith and Ron Barassi, perhaps the most famous partnership in the history of the Melbourne Football Club. Smith, the fiery orator, Barassi, the inspirational leader. After the fairy tale end of the 1964 season and a 6th premiership from 8 attempts, things would never be the same again. If there was a pivotal moment in the history of a football club, this was certainly that moment. The Melbourne skipper stunned his legion of fans by accepting a lucrative offer to move to Carlton as captain coach.
We've never been closer, and Norm, he's a great man. He's offered to help me in any way, coaching-wise. Any problems, he's gone through the same thing. He's had to go, not had to go like, well, yes, he had to go, whereas I don't have to go. It's the difference between he and I when he went to Fitzroy. But he knows the trouble about leaving a club that he has had a long association with and going to a new one. And any way he can help me, well, he will. He's just great in this way.
After 203 games, 5 seasons as captain, 2 as premiership skipper, and with the highest profile in football, Barassi was off to conquer new fields. And history has shown he would do just that with Carlton and later North Melbourne. To this day, he doesn't regret the move.
It was a very, very hard thing to do. I mean, the opportunities for me were just, undoubted. So that was not even a question. It was just, the only question was, leaving Melbourne. And I changed my mind a couple of times, which for old Carlton must have driven them crazy.
Yesterday's drama in the big football story started when players were called to a meeting at the Melbourne Cricket Ground.
In July, Norm Smith would be sacked. It sparked extraordinary and perhaps unparalleled publicity.
Tony Charlton's Football Show.
On Friday night at 8 o'clock, Norman Smith received a letter sent by special delivery. The letter produced the bombshell that his appointment as coach of the strongest football club in the history of the game was cancelled as from that date.
Channel 9 devoted its entire football show on Sunday under host Tony Charlton to the events of the previous 48 hours. It would be one of the most talked about football insights ever aired.
Well, The time's come and I honestly don't know what to say.
Don't tell me you're stuck for words, Tony.
Maybe it's best I don't say anything. Where does it all start?
Well, it starts back, I'd say a year or two ago. I think when the committee failed to support me, or give me the support that I wanted in this writ action, it was unacceptable to me that I could work with men who wouldn't back me, men who would expect me to get the utmost from the players and demand from the players the loyalty and support, and at the other end of the line were not prepared to give me their support. That's where it started.
The crux of the whole matter was a libel suit brought against him by field umpire Don Blue.
I spoke to Len and I said, I think I'll offer my resignation, and Len said to me, don't be a fool, you owe it to the boys to keep coaching, and I felt that this was so. So he said, eat humble pie. Ever eaten humble pie? It's got an awful taste, but I ate humble pie and I tricked the committee. They expected me to blow up and they had the opportunity. Well, instead of that happening there and then, they waited for something else to happen. And it didn't happen. So then they created 2 lies. They created 2 lies and put it in writing and sent it out by special messengers just to get rid of me. No, I think there was 2 images at Melbourne that certain people wanted to destroy. In one sense it was Ronnie, and then I think the other sense it's me.
There had been suggestions that he was looking to move across the park to Punt Road and the coaching position at Richmond, made vacant by the illness of brother Len.
I'm Melbourne at this stage, Tony, I'm Melbourne. I'm Melbourne, and to talk about anything like that would be against these principles that I mentioned. I am Melbourne, and I'm Melbourne through and through. I sat and listened to it on the radio yesterday, first time for 31 years. I've had to listen to something that I love. It's not very easy to take. I don't know what I'll do, Tony.
Is there a possibility?
And in the background, the lingering doubt over Smith's support for the clearance of his greatest player Barassi to Carlton. Barassi, although with another club, made a special appearance.
I would say one thing, everyone knows it's a tragedy what has happened, but the thing that I feel is grossly unjust is the allegations that the club have made on Norm Smith's character, which I feel is wrong, and I can't understand any committee coming to this decision and allegation after knowing the man the way they have. He's been at Melbourne almost 30 years, and he's been straight and honest all those 30 years. And even if it were true, and it's not, of course, but even if it were, I mean, the fact that they didn't give him a chance or any way at all, it's beyond me, and it's a pity such a great club has seen fit to do such a thing.
Do you think the wound can be healed?
No.
It made for fiery Sunday lunchtime TV. The previous day, Melbourne had lost to North Melbourne at the Coburg ground, the Demons under the ageing Checker Hughes. That night, the team had visited Smith's home. Later, they would attend a dance at the club. The position of the players was never in doubt. On the Sunday morning, skipper Hassaman, vice-captain Brian Keneally and rover Johnny Townsend were in the studios.
I rang all players yesterday morning, and I was in touch with all players before 9:30 yesterday morning, and not one player mentioned to me that they would not play on Saturday afternoon.
The support of the legends of the club was unequivocal.
I think it would clear the air considerably if the Melbourne committee made it open to, well, mainly to the supporters of the Melbourne Football Club, their reasons for this action.
Well, Jeff, I would say that this is one of the greatest calamities that ever happened at Melbourne, and I'll cast my mind back to a little bit of history that the Melbourne Football Club started to succeed in 1933 when Checker Hughes took over, and we have been successful right through. So therefore, why at this stage of our football season, when we're trying to make the four, why we should be have our coach sacked, who is the best coach in the Victorian Football League at the moment. We've got a successful coach who built us up in 33, and I've got a successful coach. He is sacked. Why?
Smith demanded the supporters and members support him.
All I'm interested in, Tony, that the truth comes out, and the truth can only come from the people concerned. Once the truth is established, well, then I'm quite happy to accept any decision.
4 days later, Smith would be reinstated. The damage had been done. Melbourne would miss the finals for the first time in 11 seasons and not play in September for another 22 years. In 1967, Smith would end his association with Melbourne. He'd played 210 games, kicked 546 goals, been the league's leading goal kicker in 1941, was twice best and fairest, kicked a record 7 goals in the 1940 Grand Final, and played in 6 Grand Finals for 4 flags. As coach, he would take charge of 310 games for 197 wins and coach the club to 6 premierships. His departure was the end of an era. In November 1967, Melbourne farewelled Norm Smith with a dinner at the Melbourne Town Hall. Checker Hughes and Ron Barassi joined in the picture with his successor, John Beckwith.
In actual fact, he had a heart attack at half-time in the 4th last game in 67, and he said to me, walking down the steps into the Carlton visitors' room, "You take over," and he clutched his heart, and they called the doctor. So it was a very traumatic time as far as I was concerned.
Brian Dixon had overtaken Jack Mueller's club games record. He would finish in 1968 with 252 games.
It's been pretty well how it's been from the end of the first quarter. A longer kick this time by Johnson. He doesn't try to pick somebody up. Man in front. The Honourable MLA, 250 game, Brian Dixon.
A member of 6 premiership sides and the winner of the 1961 Tassie medal at the Carnival in Brisbane, Dixon would retire along with fellow grand final heroes Don Williams and Hasser Mann, who went to Perth after contractual negotiations broke down. He was club captain, triple best and fairest, and only 28.
Oh, that was a bad attempt at getting the ball away. Hasser Mann pounced on it. He doesn't know what to do with it. Gets it back to Lakes, who was running past. A little pass over towards the forward line. And marked on the half-forward line by Hardeman.
Among the recruits to the club in the late 60s were Ray Biffin, Greg Park and Gary Hardeman. But they were hard years.
It's not a bad-looking kick. I think it'll fall a little bit short. Walker's coming through. He couldn't mark this one. There's Owls. He might kick over his shoulder. He has an attempt. He's just a little bit wide of the sticks, and there'll be a throw-in right alongside the point post.
I was just overawed with the guys like Hasser Mann and Brian Keneally and Stan Alves and that, you know. So I was really overawed, and really I was really a boy, not knowing where I was going.
From Tasmania, they had recruited a tangle-footed ruckman with a big grin, who'd be the best first-year player under Smith in 1967.
Hardeman's moved to the centre half forward. Melbourne come forward again, further forward. Oh, Walker, a beauty. A one-handed mark, 2 bites of the cherry, and then with the one hand again, not the 2. Well, it could restore the lead for Melbourne. He's only 20 yards out directly in front, and he's kicked 1. He's kicked 2. Well, the lead swung around again. Max Walker kicks his second goal. His side's 8, and they lead by a point. And this is a crowd-pleasing match if you've ever seen one.
Then I remember Norm Smith coming into the property steward's room, and he said, "Son, how do you feel about playing in the seniors on Saturday?" And I went, He said, "I thought you'd feel like that." And he said, "You'll be in the first ruck. You won't have to listen to it on the radio tonight. Now, don't worry too much. Come round to Marge in my place on Friday night. We had the big steak, and I wouldn't do these days to have it. We followed that up by a big pavlova and ice cream, and yeah, I fronted up on the Saturday."
Taken 3 marks. He's had 5 kicks up towards the half-forward line. Desperation for Melbourne at this stage. There's Lilly backing up very well at the back of the pack. A long kick back towards the wing position. It's all Melbourne. Walker there takes it well judged and a timely mark.
Channel 9 instant replay.
There's Lilly backing up very well at the back of the pack. A long kick back towards the wing position. It's all Melbourne. Walker there takes it well judged and a timely mark. He plays on, stab past towards the centre of the ground. Park making up a lot of ground. He's been pretty quiet after the early start. He plays on, has one of his few kicks for the match over towards Hardeman on the half-forward flank.
St Kilda into attack, but not for long. Johnson gets the ball away. Dixon's there to back him up. Does so. Puts it out onto the half-forward flank where Feldman is now. The chance for Park, he's gotten it in. He's attacked by Lilly, but gets it past the man. He kicked that point for Melbourne about 2 or 3 minutes ago to make the scores 2-goal difference. Now, if Mann can get this to Melbourne man, they're a chance, because I think he'd be too far out to kick it.
It's a long kick. He's making a liar of me. It's a beautiful kick. It's a snow stop. Oh, what?
Now he takes the ball with him, turns, shoots a small pass across to the centre of the ground to where Ray Groom was waiting for it. He's about 45 yards. There's a lead coming upfield for him. He ignores it rather, gets it down towards the forward area. Hassaman couldn't mark it, he's been pressurised. Stan Alves grabs the ball, he's trying to gather it forward and take it forward towards goal. It's a free kick. It'll go to Alves. He was in that pack, he was being grabbed from all angles, around the neck. And that's what he's getting the free kick for. It's a goal.
In 1969, Greg Wells came to the club. He made the jump from thirds to seniors in 3 weeks.
He does now, shoots a hand pass out to Park. Park gets the kick but swung at the vitals.
Johnny Beckwith came down to watch me play in the under-19s and also had a word to me at training one night, and before you knew it, I was in the seniors and rolled up. First game for Melbourne against Carlton. Carlton were on top of the ladder, Melbourne were on the bottom of the ladder. Jimmy Carball came in and he gave me a jumper, number 11, was previously worn by some great Melbourne players, Laurie Mithern and Tony Anderson before me. And I put it on back to front. I was that nervous.
In 3 seasons under Beckwith, Melbourne won 17 of their 62 games. In 1971, his trusty assistant Ian Ridley would take over and the results would be impressive. In his first season, he would be named Coach of the Year.
He was a great orator and he'd be able to tell a real sort of picture of how he'd want you to play. I remember one time he talked about a rose and how the petals made the rose stand up, and the rose as it blossomed lost the petals, and it kept on growing, and it just really sent shivers down my spine.
Our teamwork's just fallen away. I know that we have had injuries, that's an excuse. Wet weather is another excuse. But purely and simply, I think, Peter, that our confidence is down at the moment, our teamwork is missing, and this is what we've got to get back. If we can get it back, we've still got a good chance.
In one of the biggest footy coups of the year, Melbourne spent in excess of $15,000 to acquire South Australian star John Tilbrook, soon to be nicknamed Diamond Jim. He made his debut against South Melbourne in round 12.
And he's kicked the thing about 150 yards.
And he kicked 2 goals that day, which both kicks would be as long as I've ever seen. And I thought, oh, well, what have we got here? And John didn't quite go on, but he still wasn't a bad footballer.
One of the fieriest matches of 1972, Melbourne and Essendon in round 6. Greg Wells in his number 11 Guernsey in the thick of things, along with a young ruckman from Assumption College named Peter, Patrick, Pius, Paul Keenan, or just plain Crackers.
Yeah, and then it was on. I think there were 34 players in the melee in front of the smoker stand at the MCG. The gabardine overcoats and the cigar smoke, they were all up in arms. It's incredible. I mean, the whole one side of the ground was just push and shove. A couple of our blokes, I think Stanley Alves and Greggy Wells, they went for a big one, got dragged, thrown right out. Still not sure how many people actually got reported in that. Probably none, but it was a beauty. It was one of the biggest I've ever did.
Ladies and gentlemen.
In 1972, Wells and Hardiman would finish second and third to Collingwood's Len Thompson for the Brownlow medal.
They kept saying G. Park, G. Hardiman, and at the end of the night, or not quite at the end of the night, but the second last vote of the night, it was Len Thompson and Greg Wells on 22 votes apiece, and they read out a couple more votes, and they've gone Melbourne, G. Park, and then the last vote was Collingwood, Al Thompson, and he won the Brownlow. But did I think I had won it? Really, I didn't give it a lot of thought. It all happened so quickly. I never expected to win it. But there I was at the end of the night with a big chance of winning it. But as it turned out, I ran second and he won it, and it goes down into the history books as Al Thompson Brownlow medalist 1972.
Walker would leave the Demons after 85 games to pursue his Test career. The controversial 10-year rule was introduced in 1973, offering players with a decade's service an unrestricted clearance. To the club would come Big Carl Ditterich. The St Kilda superstar was strong, fast and mean.
And he'd been in a pretty good paddock, I reckon, over the summer season because he just wasn't quite prepared, but he certainly was a revelation.
His wife at the time was my English teacher at school, and I wasn't game to call him Carl. I had to call him Mr. Ditterich. I had to call his wife Mrs. Ditterich, so I got the Mr. Ditterich out on the training track. How do you do, Mr. Ditterich, when I got introduced, all that sort of stuff.
In mid-1973, Ridley took the punt and blooded a skinny youngster named Robert Flower. He would become the longest-serving player in the club's history and one of its favourite sons.
Well, I remember getting announced in the side on the Thursday night and going to school the next day with my picture in the paper, getting reading Macbeth, then going to the football, not having met any of the senior players, and I'd only trained with the under-19, so to get promoted in the first was quite a thing. Mum and Dad had to drive me in, being 17 years of age, didn't have a licence, so got to the ground, then Mum and Dad and myself had to pay to get in, and then introduce ourselves at the door to try and get in the change rooms with the doorman, and then Barry Burke grabbed hold of me and took me around the rooms, introduced me to all the players, and they all looked at me with it couldn't be serious having this guy playing for you, the way I was, thin and hardly any character at all.
Well, when Robbie came into the room, I thought he was a supporter coming in to get autographs. He was like a shotgun pull-through. And he was tall, thin, he wore glasses, and one of the committee men brought him up to me and they said, "This is Robbie Flower. He's playing his first game at the Melbourne Football Club today." And I said, "Oh, you're kidding, aren't you?" And I really didn't believe it. But anyway, he went on, he played that day, and we had a luncheon or a dinner that night, and Ian really got up and he said, this is $20 being donated by a Catarian, and it's going to Robbie Flower, who played his first game today because he was magnificent.
Taking into account poise, ability, skill, marking, kicking, handballing, it doesn't matter what you refer to, that Robert Flower is the greatest footballer that I have seen in my life.
Norm Smith had followed Ron Barassi to North Melbourne in 1973, but would not see out the season. Smith passed away on July the 29th. He was 57. Another poor season, and at the end of 1973, another coaching appointment. For the first time since 1933, Melbourne looked outside the fold. They would appoint South Melbourne's triple Brownlow medalist Bobby Skilton for the 74 season.
We can only take one game at a time, and our big worry... I took over a side that had lost 10 games straight the year before, and everybody said I was an idiot. And after we'd lost 8 games straight, I agreed with them. We're at the stage then, if we won the toss, we did a lap of honour.
While its depth was poor, and Skilton saw his side win the wooden spoon in 74 with only 3 wins, there were a handful of standouts. Gary Hardiman would finish runner-up to Keith Gregg in the Brownlow count. A year later, Stan Elves would finish a vote behind the winner, Gary Dempsey.
The ball right down the ground, back towards Clark. He gets pushed. Clark, and so he turns. There's Clark shooting for goal. A good goal by Clark. Great play. That's nearly touched by Flower. Oh, no, it could have really bounced through. Flower gets a hand pass back here, keeps it in play towards Williamson. Williamson over towards Baker, and Baker hooks the goal through.
Carl Ditterich returned to St Kilda in 1976 in a deal that saw Alan Davis and Shane Grambo become Demons. But this was a year in which Melbourne came close to ending a horror run. It would take 4 successive wins and a slice of luck to get into the finals. Skilton took his side to victories over Richmond, St Kilda and Geelong, then faced Collingwood at Victoria Park.
For home now, runs up towards the half-forward flank, gets a long hand pass across here towards Woodward. Woodman gives it back towards Carroll. Here's a shot at goal coming up as Carroll puts it on its way. That's the best passage of play by Melbourne.
We really had momentum flowing, and it got to the last game of the year out at Collingwood. And Collingwood, I think, it was a history-making season for them because for us to beat them, put them as wooden spooners. And I think the only time that, well, up until then, that they'd had that honour, so to speak. We'd had it many times, of course. But we went out there and we expected to win. Laurie Fowler got knocked out in the first minute of play, carried off on a stretcher and couldn't go back on because there wasn't interchange in those days. But we ended up winning the game, and we thought would have made it because we expected Carlton to be victors in their match, but they weren't to be. And it was funny because the Collingwood supporters actually started singing the Footscray song halfway, or almost at the end of the last quarter, sensing that we weren't going to make the finals, and they couldn't have cared less about them being on the bottom.
It was enough for Bobby Skilton.
Even if we were premiers, runners-up, or had a disappointing year, as we no doubt have, then this was going to be the last. The demands time-wise are just too much.
In his place, former premiership centre-half back Dennis Jones.
I don't think we could ever have the run with injury we had last year. That was the most unfortunate early in the season, and one would look to presenting the side early in the season in a very fit state. Plus, there's some players who were very young last year, another year older, and they'll have developed far beyond what they were this time last year.
In 1979, Carl Ditterich returned as captain coach. His 2-year tenure would be eventful, to say the least. In 1980, Robbie Flower was providing the grace. Others were providing the muscle. From Carlton and North Melbourne had come Brent Tiger Croswell.
When Tiger came along, you didn't know what to expect. And I thought, well, he's got this nickname Tiger because he's such a ferocious character. He's one that you'd fear out in the football field and maybe off the football field as well. But he didn't get his nickname from that. He just didn't know anyone's name. He'd introduce and go, "G'day, Tiger, how are you?" Because he couldn't remember your name. And that regardless of who you were.
The Demons sold Greg Wells to Carlton for $200,000 halfway through the season. But against his old side, he shone.
And a beautiful mark there taken by Wells.
In the final round against Collingwood, the man they called the Shadow was at his most lethal. It would not be enough in this, his 285th and final game.
Down goes Andrew Arwen. He got a beauty. Oh, right across the bridge of the nose.
The back is Picken, takes it off the pack, gets a hand pass out. And see, there's another Collingwood player now.
Yeah, Ditterich got awesome.
History would show that any game that Carl wasn't involved in, we didn't win. We hadn't won a game without him actually playing out on the arena when he was involved. But be coach of the side, he was a tough man. Really tough, hard expectations on the training track and make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I think it's hard in anyone's book to be a captain coach of a side, and probably the 2 years there told a story. If he had his time again, I'm sure he would have retired from playing and become just a coach out and out.
While Ditterich was preparing for a move to Queensland, he argued that the club should pursue its most famous son. It was time for the return of Ron Barassi. From 1965 until he left North Melbourne at the end of 1980, Ron Barassi had coached nearly 350 games. He'd lifted Carlton from oblivion to its first flag in 21 years and had taken North to its first premiership in 1975. Melbourne welcomed the super coach back with open arms. Chairman Sir Billy Snedden, General Manager Dick Seddon and high-profile radio personality Darren Hinch, who'd led the campaign, rejoiced. In 1981, the prodigal son had returned.
I just have a little feeling that there are some things the players have to learn, particularly about team football. And part of the job of a coach is to teach. I'll be doing that.
As well as Adrian Gallagher, there would be a team featuring Barry Richardson, Slug Jordan, Keith McKenzie, John Tickell and Peter Smith. The 5-year plan had been implemented. Back at the club, Gary Hardiman after 3 years with Sturt.
I was probably their biggest recruit, and I was 31 years of age. So, no, Barassi, I think in that year went through around about 40 players and turned over a lot of players trying to get the players up. He said it was going to be a 5-year plan, but I think personally he wanted to get things done straight away.
After the Demons lost to St Kilda, Barassi demanded action. Early morning training runs, no beards. Gary Baker and Peter Giles faced the razor. Discipline was the catchword. It was hard to get that message through, especially when you had players like Brent Tiger Croswell in action.
Towards Byrne, he gets a shocking bounce. Here's an opportunity now for Melbourne if they can set up some shepherding. An easy chance for them to go forward through Elshaw, but in the meantime the whistle has sounded and Croswell is not happy. Cost them a goal. It has cost them a goal. Forward once again through Healy, half forward. Goes back towards half forward once again. Chance for Croswell. In towards goal. He's made no mistake this time.
The coach, I think it was Carl at the time, might have called a meeting in the coach's room, and we're dripping wet after the thing, and everyone called for the dressing gowns so we wouldn't catch the death of cold, and someone yelled out to Tiger to go and get the dressing gowns. And he's looked around, he's going, what? Me? 254 games, 3 grand finals, 4 best and fairest, and you want me to get the dressing gowns? So he's called out to Wellesley, you get the dressing gowns. He was captain at the time, so it was quite unique. He just couldn't imagine him doing anything like that. He was one man that came to the club that never... He'd walk into the rooms without carrying a kit bag. He'd leave his boots, all his gear there to be cleaned by the property steward, everything. He'd come with a towel under his arm. That was his trading gear.
Then, of course, Barassi and his team had Mark Jackson at full forward. In 1981, in his debut season, the former Richmond Junior champ kicked 76 goals to top the goal kicking. It was the best performance by a Demon forward since Fred Fanning 34 years earlier.
Kelvin Moore said to him, you'll never kick this goal as long as your backside points to the ground. He did the handstand and said, well, it's not pointing to the ground, son. And Kelvin Moore, as you see the film clip, just looks around in disbelief.
Oh, dear. He is a one-man show down there. He's as happy as Larry. Kicked his first goal and he has told about 15,000 people. Lines up the drop punt. That's close. Oh! Jacko knocked the goal umpire down.
Late in the season, as Melbourne accepted the fact that the wooden spoon would be theirs, Croswell and South's David Rhys-Jones tangled. It was an ugly scene. Both would get 4 weeks. Rhys-Jones also in trouble over this incident with runner Peter Smith. The recruit of the year for 1982 would be Brian Wilson. At 20, Wilson had already been dumped by Footscray for being overweight as a 16-year-old and by North as well. In September, he would win the club's first Brownlow medal in 36 years by 5 votes from Ross Glendinning and 6 from Lee Matthews.
Brian Wilson of the Melbourne Club, the winner of the 1982 Brownlow medal. And I know on your behalf, all the people here at the Southern Cross Hotel tonight and all the many hundreds of thousands of people out there watching this telecast, you'd like me to pass on to Brian your congratulations also.
The antics of Mark Jackson would not be tolerated. He would take his tricks to St Kilda. To the club would come a pair of highly priced champions, Brownlow medalists Peter Moore and Kelvin Templeton.
Wilson's in the front position. Templeton coming. Bailey, I think it might be, who's come across the front of the back. No, it is Templeton. Called play on by the umpire for what reason I do not know. Templeton surely took the mark.
Just see that. Well, he certainly was upset then.
In 1984, again glimpses. At one stage, 6 wins in a row mid-season, including an excellent victory over Hawthorn that ended a run of losses stretching back to 1973.
There is sartorial splendour in the form of Ronald Dale Barassi with the matching bow tie and pocket handkerchief.
Melbourne's run at the finals would be halted by Essendon in cold and calculating style.
Not a gut, but Wood downed him. Moore and Merritt for the knockout. Knocked out by Moore, picked up that time by Williams. He slewed that one off the side of his boot.
On to Templeton. Is that his first goal for the day? I don't think so. Elshaw is there. Oh, went for the slipper, kicked the Melbourne player right in the hand. And Yates will take the free kick.
Ball back, kicked off. Oh, there we see Vanderhack copped a beauty in the face.
Oh, Greg Healy copped a ripper from Donnell.
There's Vanderhaar again. He's dropped that one, but he goes down. Oh, there we see
another charge.
Connolly getting into a bit of trouble as he downs
I think you call it a square off, wouldn't you, Lou?
There they are all pouncing in now. You just try and sort that one out yourself.
Barassi was dapper, but he'd lost none of that famous snarl. This was the coach at his most belligerent. The victim, Shane Zantuck.
Zantuck and Barassi are having a go. The players are pushing Zantuck away from him. Barassi's white down there in the
in the face, but they had a real go, and I'm not kidding. The players had to push Zantuck away. He's wanting to go back and have a go at him again.
Today, the two protagonists can laugh. Then it was deadly serious.
Look at you pack of weak he said. None of you all look me in the eye. So, you know, I graduated from Broadmeadows West Tech, see, so that was a pretty high level of education. But I was always smart enough to listen to what he had to say. So I thought, well, at least when he gets to me, the least I can do is look him in the eye. So as he's going along, the bit of spit starting to come out on the moustache and a bit of froth, and I thought, well, here we go. So he gets to me, and so I look him, you know, just out of fright. So he says to me, "Don't look at me like that, you have smart-ass little," you know. So I said, "Well, you've just had a go at all the boys here for not looking at you. I'm looking at you, and you're having a go at me." I said, "You're nothing but a big sook."
This is new.
There had been other moments, this one a standout.
Hello? Healy off, Ellingworth on. Bloody weak as piss. I mean, don't look at me like that. How many kicks have you got? That's the answer to everything. Possessions. You give me possessions and I'll shut up.
It was unbelievable that day, but I just looked at the film clip before and looked at when Shane was involved in that, and I did notice myself come in, and I didn't look at Barassi. I looked the other way, and I thought, oh, well, that must have been the reason when he said, "Look me in the eye," and I thought, well, I'll get Shane out of here and look after him and bugger Barassi.
There would be some consolation for a season that promised so much and yet failed to deliver. Peter Moore would win his second Brownlow medal, emulating Ian Stewart, the only other player to have won at two clubs.
In 1984, Melbourne's Peter Moore. On behalf of the football fraternity, Peter, well done, congratulations, a very, very worthy winner.
Naturally enough, and while I got the opportunity, I'd like to thank a few people, because the Melbourne Football Club bought me from Collingwood when I was as low as probably anyone could be as a footballer, and they showed tremendous faith in me, and my first year with them wasn't all that it should have been and all that I expected and all that they expected, but they stuck with me and they supported me and encouraged me all the way, and it was fantastic. And there's a group of boys sitting up the back here, not only my teammates, but they're my mates as well, and they play for Melbourne, and the way that they accepted me into the club and you know, really encouraged me to get back into top form, and they're just fantastic.
In 1985, Melbourne would sign a 20-year lease and make the Junction Oval its training base. For Barassi, this would be his last hurrah.
His professionalism on the football field, I think what he did, he planted a lot of seeds for the club to grow. And whilst we didn't have the success in the era that he was there, he put those seeds there for future coaching, and it gave all the players that were under him at the time a stepping stone to the level of success that we had in the year 87 onwards, really. And I put that down to Barassi and what he did in his 5 years at Melbourne.
There would be no miracles under Ron Barassi, but his coaching days did leave one legacy. The man who captained the Galahs to Ireland a quarter of a century earlier returned and plucked a rare prize. The vision and foresight would reap rich rewards in the decade ahead. In the mid-80s, Melbourne had begun bringing youngsters out from Ireland. Scottish-born Sean White would play the first of his 150 games in 1985.
Kicks in towards Sean White. Members side, White, good strong mark.
But it was the man who became known as Dublin Jim who would become the cult figure. John Northey had been appointed coach, took one look at Jim Steins and took immediate action.
For someone to come over from Ireland to play with a club that was losing every week, it wasn't a lot of fun. But I thought I was about to get my big break, and Super called me into the match committee room and told me that I was getting a sack.
Gary Lyon would play over 200 games and captain the club in 119 of them. The Rookie of the Year in 1986 made an instant impact in his debut against Richmond.
Into the open goal, he stabs. What's happened? I think he's kicked it.
It was a really hot day, I remember. It was about 30-odd degrees. I played on the half-back flank, a very quick, mobile half-back flanker, and played on Michael Pickering and got caned. And then late in the game, I went forward and kicked a couple of goals in the last 5 minutes, and we won by about 10 points.
86 was a very, very hard year, I must say. When I took over coaching, I didn't expect to finish where we did, which was well down the bottom. And you take over a club and believe that you know, you have all the wherewithals to get something out of the players. And I must say that first year I got absolutely nothing.
Good centering kick.
From 11th in 86, Melbourne in 1987 produced one of the great years in the club's history. In April, just 3 days after losing in Brisbane, and with a dozen top players injured, Melbourne faced Essendon for the National Panasonic Cup.
87 came along, and that night premiership, I mean, it was just one of the most magnificent things that I've ever been involved with.
Wilson out wide to Giles. He's got a good run. Danaher tackles him. Giles to the ground. Back it comes. A left foot snap.
Bailey.
And it's through. It's Brett Bailey. He's kicked one sensational goal, and that's another one. And the stand has erupted. The Demons have taken the lead.
25 and a half minutes. We better be precise, Douglas, because the seconds count now. The Dons through Clark. There's the siren.
Acting captain Danny Hughes accepted Melbourne's first trophy since the 1971 night premiership. Alongside him, the injured Robbie Flower.
We'd been striving for it for so long, and to finally get it as a club, as people have worked hard for it on and off the field, and the supporters have been there through very thin times in the late 70s, mid 80s, that they deserved it, and that's what I was so proud of.
Melbourne had won 5 games in a row when it ventured to the Western Oval for the final round of the 1987 season, regarded by many as the best round of football in league history. It had to win and needed Geelong to beat Hawthorn at Cardinia Park.
Out to Stretch. From near the boundary line, what a kick! Chance for Jackson.
Flower with 3 goals, Melbourne by 15 points.
Melbourne in front.
Oh, look, that game there was a highlight of my career, and a highlight because you strive for so much in a football career. In the early part of your career, I probably thought, well, being here is a great thing. Once you're there and you're cemented into a side, the next thing is to have success. So our success was to make the finals, and that game out at Footscray was the achievement and the culmination of all that hard work throughout the years to actually get to the finals.
In its first final series for 23 years, Melbourne eliminated North Melbourne by 118 points. Flower kicked 5.
To keep it in play, does so with a hand pass. Campbell snaps towards goal. Melbourne can do no wrong.
A week later, it was Sydney by 76 points in the rain. 17 scoring shots for 8 goals 9 in a record second quarter blitz.
Great record he's got coaching. Viney, brilliant play by Todd Viney, crashes his way through, and what a team-inspiring goal that was.
An excellent goal.
The rampant Demons went to Waverley to face the might of Hawthorn on preliminary final day. Melbourne 22 points up at the last change and poised for a grand final spot.
Brereton, Campbell gets away. He kicks, he misses. So Hawthorn live again.
But from a Melbourne point of view, Pete, it's at the right end of the ground. Hawthorn have to come all the way down the ground. 28 and a half minutes have gone. Alan Jeans has a close look at the situation. The long kick taken by Swab, plays on. Langford comes out with the ball, drives it down. Buckenauer, trip. Buckenauer's free kick. Siren sounds.
Then it happened. Gary Buckenauer on the siren outside 50 metres. Here you see the young Jim Steins run across the mark and take Hawthorn 15 metres closer and into the grand final.
If he kicks this goal, Hawthorn are in the grand final.
The umpires haven't heard it yet, I don't think.
If he kicks this goal, Hawthorn are in the 1987 grand final. If he misses, Melbourne are in. There's the kick. It's a goal. It's a goal. Hawthorn have won with a kick after the siren. What a
Jerry Buckenari proved himself a true champion. He kicked 5 goals. He had to kick that, but I really believe that 15-metre penalty made all the difference to that kick. I doubt whether he would have kicked it from where he was, Bob.
No doubt about that.
And that just shows you that, you know, a little bit of undisciplined play can cost you, but let's not worry about that. Let's thank and congratulate every player that was out there. That man there carried a wrist injury, Dippier, a minute ago, stayed on the ground.
Well, as I came in off the ground, I was pretty disappointed. I had my head down. I just couldn't look at anyone. The directors are all there and just inside the rooms, and photographers were everywhere, and I just couldn't look at them. And I couldn't face anyone with coach. And I sort of briefly looked up and saw John on the far side, and he was going for it. You know, he was really disappointed, and he just... all I can remember is him saying, just don't do that again. And, you know, at the time, you know, he could have said anything, and, you know, I would have accepted it, you know. You know, he could have said, you'll never play for Melbourne again, and I would have said, fair enough. You know, I was so disappointed. And, you know, we sat down and everyone just had their heads. I didn't even look around, I just had my head in my hands, and I just couldn't look at anyone. It was, and I would have been like that for 10 minutes, easy, 20 minutes.
I called him probably all the silly bastards under the sun. Would have been ready to pull limb from limb at that stage, you know. I mean, it was a very tense time at that stage, the game going either way, and our first opportunity to play in a grand final, you know, was just so disappointing and frustrating that we couldn't do anything about it. However, having thought about it after, and the event is always very heated at that stage, you know, and our mind just goes ways perhaps that it shouldn't. But looking back over it, I mean, had Simon Eichel kicked the goal that Simon should have kicked, had Rodney Grinton not given away that free kick, had from Langford's kick straight down the centre of the ground, had we had players in the correct position behind the packs would have stopped that ball, the game was over.
You know, that's why I said it would be terrible if it happened at the end of your career, because you go out on a sour note. Whereas I knew that, OK, this has got to be the start. I've got to build on this, and I've got to, you know, make up for it, let's say. It's impossible to make up for something like that, but I had to say, well, look, repay something back to the club for what I'd done. And, you know, I was determined to do what I had to do and train my backside off just to get back in there and do the best I could for the team.
It would be the end for Robert Flower, a record 272 games of sheer class, 127 of them as captain. In 1988, Melbourne would win its first 5 matches. It would, however, slump late in the season, losing 6 of its last 7, but squeezed into the final 5. On grand final day, it could look back on a thrilling 1-point win over the Eagles in the elimination final, a 13-point win over Collingwood in the first semi, and a 22-point win over reigning premiers Carlton in the preliminary final.
Michael Tuck, then beside with a kick. Yates, that's a good mark in the circumstances. Greasy ball now as he goes down towards the pocket. Williams on his chest. David Williams will kick from about 45 metres out. A very acute angle. There's the lead. Good talking by Williams, calling out his teammate. Good looking kick. That's a magnificent kick.
The first grand final since Barassi's team won in 1964 was to be a disaster. Hawthorn would win by a record 96 points. If it was possible to erase some of the hurt, it came in 1989 with the National Panasonic Cup, and for the second time in 3 years the Demons won, this time over Geelong.
Lovely long kick straight through.
5 goals to Bennett.
In 1991, after 3 successive first semi-final defeats, Melbourne would celebrate, and how. Jimmy Steins would be a clear-cut winner in the Brownlow medal.
Congratulations from everyone.
After 5 years in the finals and 7 as coach, John Northey was replaced by Neil Baum at the end of the 1992 season. Northey had put the pride back into the club, given its success after so many years of failure.
I thought when Noel McMahon rang that he was joking, but it took me a little while to get my head around coming back to Melbourne. But after I'd been back for 5 minutes, I realised, what have I been away for so long for? Because AFL footy then was really starting to do what it's doing now. It was a very strong environment. The team was going somewhere, so it was terrific. And I wondered what had taken me so long to want to come back to it.
In 1994, Melbourne would again creep into the finals. A 9-goal haul by David Schwartz against Sydney, lifting the Demons from 9th to 7th.
Kick 3 in the turf.
We tried to be super positive about it and said, you know, this is the game that stands between us playing in the finals and not.
At the MCG a week later, the Demons would devastate Carlton, Sean Charles kicking 5 goals.
Play David Schwartz, races at the goal, it's another one to the Demons.
Gary Lyon had starred in a losing side against Footscray a month earlier. On first semi-final day, he produced the perfect 10 against the Bulldogs. Melbourne was on another roll.
Spills for Gary Lyon, spins out of trouble.
We let them back in the second quarter, which was a bit unusual, but we got our feet back again and we played a bit tighter and started playing from them rather than just going out and getting the ball ourselves.
It's a bit of a dream, yeah. I think the result is probably more of a satisfying thing than the 10 goals, you know. It's a terrific effort against Footscray, who had beaten us twice through the year, and to get away with a very good win as we have and to stay alive is very satisfying.
Unfortunately, for us, I suppose, we had to go to Perth to play against the West Coast, and when you look back on that year, wherever you played West Coast, they were going to be hard to toss. They were a pretty tough outfit, but we hadn't been to Perth, I think, for 2 years at all, and to go there and play, they were just a little bit too good for us.
In the seasons ahead, Melbourne slipped down the ladder. Baum under pressure, the club fighting to retain its identity, battling to win members, and struggling financially.
No, I can only do what I do and be who I am. I mean, if that's no good, well, that's okay.
Merger talk was in the air. Everyone had a stance. Barassi would later oppose the merge. In September 1996 at the Dallas Brooks Hall, emotions overflowed and friendships were shattered as the Demons voted under Chairman Ian Ridley to merge with Hawthorn.
And we don't want to go to Glenferrie Oval with their mediocre facilities. We want the best in the AFL. That's what we want.
The Melbourne Hawks vote proved football is a religion in Victoria, Ridley and his disciples exercising the demon from 52% of the members.
All you board members that had the bloody courage to recommend this, get on your feet! Get on your feet! Get on your feet!
But across town, Hawthorn members had voted against the merge. The club found a saviour in Joseph Gutnick, a mining magnate who, with former champion Brian Dixon, had produced the Demon alternative. There would be massive upheavals. Ridley was replaced by Gutnick, the pro-merger board members replaced.
Mr Cameron Schwab has been appointed unanimously as the club's new Chief Executive Officer. The board further endorses the continuation of Mr Neil Baum as senior coach.
Baum was under siege. He would be replaced after his side could kick only 3 goals against Port Adelaide. Melbourne responded under new coach and former player Greg Hutchison a week later by beating Richmond.
A very bad loss to the Richmond Football Club, and you can see the excitement here and the relief from the Melbourne players.
We didn't really have a true assistant coach at the time, given that I was Neil's assistant, so we left with that in the lurch, and the lack of resources at the football club at the time were also very difficult, and the unavailability of your talented players made it extremely hard. And no, it was certainly a tough period of time for the football club.
In 1998, there would be more significant changes. After debilitating injuries had all but crippled him, Gary Lyon stepped down as captain. He would play on under Todd Viney.
From a somewhat selfish perspective, I guess, I'm hoping that it will help me prolong my footy career beyond this week and beyond this year, maybe.
Greg Hutchison would continue to coach, but in an assistant's role to newcomer Neil Danaher.
I'm very excited
firstly, to be involved with such a great football club as Melbourne. It's one of the oldest football clubs in Australia and probably the world. So I'm really excited to be involved in the rebuilding process that's now in front of us. It's going to be a great challenge.
Through all the drama, through coaching turmoil, premiership assaults and wooden spoons, there'd been one constant. Jimmy Stynes was the Iron Man. He just kept on playing. He'd overtaken Jack Titus's long-standing record of 204 consecutive games, but at 244, the run came to an end with a broken hand. In Melbourne's 140th season, another tilt at greatness.
The way he got up. There's just no doubting this young player's potential. Have a look at this jump and run and mark. Oh, that would be Cadbury's mark of the year.
That is just all jump.
There would be 14 wins. Melbourne finished 4th on the ladder. More to come. A win in the first final against reigning premiers Adelaide.
Finds space, it snaps. Magnificent goal.
Then a 51-point win over 1997 grand finalists St Kilda. This was a team that perhaps could go all the way.
Oh, it gets through. Tingay charges and goals!
North Melbourne would end the dream on preliminary final day. For Neil Danaher, the rookie coach, it had been a magnificent season. He'd lifted the Wooden Spooners a record 13 places. It would be a year tinged with sadness. The football world farewell Jimmy Stynes, who retired after 264 games.
And I'd just like to finally just thank the club for giving me an opportunity of a lifetime. Thank you.
After such a strong showing in 1998, the 99 season would be a fiasco in so many ways, on and off the field. Superstar forward Gary Lyon would be sidelined for all but 2 games before his debilitating back injury ended a brilliant career after 226 games. Glenn Lovett too would leave at season's end, and skipper Todd Viney called it a day after 233 games.
The fire in my belly to strive to be the best and train harder than the next bloke, things that have made me a 200-game player. I just feel that I haven't got that drive in my stomach anymore.
There were rumblings of discontent as the relationship between President Joseph Gutnick and CEO Cameron Schwab deteriorated. Prior to round 19, Schwab walked. If that was not bad enough, AFL Investigations Officer Michael Easy announced that the Demons had flagrantly breached the salary cap on repeated occasions through the 90s. There would be more than $500,000 in fines and draft exclusions. Finally, the AFL eased its stance, and Melbourne was forced to pay $350,000 and forfeited its top draft pick in 2000 to Fremantle as recompense for the Dockers losing Jeff White. As Melbourne slumped to 14th, there would be positives. David Neitz would top the goal kicking and take over the captaincy, and David Schwartz was back to his best, winning the Bluey Truscott Trophy as club champion.
Yeah, it was great. Just throughout the week, just sort of sat down with Neil and looked at the video and got out in the training track and practiced kicking a few goals and managed to kick a few straight today, which is good.
What about that one out in the full?
What one out the full, mate?
With its young list, Melbourne came of age in 2000. It was a season studded with stunning highlights.
Got rid of his man.
While the football world was engrossed with the exploits of runaway ladder leaders Essendon, Melbourne would string together 14 wins.
Ottens went very early, staying down as Powell. That was good to Bruce in his first game of league footy. Has kicked a goal. The rookie's kicked a goal. Needs to go on. Little chip, okay. Magoni and everything. Seacamp through the centre, 2 half forward. Bruce setting himself, used his body well. Here's Cook with a chance. Now he's got McDonald inside. Can have a shot. It's a good kick. It's a goal. He's got it. It's another one. They've got 7. Matthews' kick is a bit wayward. A ball to be won. Luff versus Seacamp. Well played, Seacamp. Can't quite get the handball away. Terrific stuff, Matthews at Seacamp. Woden, lovely kick. Leoncelli running, run down. Gets his kick to the goal square. It's a goal. It's a goal for the Demons.
The brilliant, explosive and unpredictable Jeff Farmer would kick 76 goals and win All-Australian selection.
Kick by Uze in towards full forward. Farmer! You little beauty!
It was a great kick by Uze then.
To take the lovely sit.
Berkey was caught under it, he had nowhere to go. He said, I'm in trouble here.
A goal to Melbourne, kick by Jeff Farmer. Anthony McDonald's kicking towards full forward. It's a good kick. The ball spills. Jeffrey! Got another one. Punched away.
In June, the greats would gather as Melbourne announced its team of the century. While we could enjoy the great names and deeds of seasons past, 2000 was presenting the Demons with undreamt of riches.
And a big grab taken by Schwartz.
And they'll be well pleased with their start to the year. I think openly admitting before the season started that they weren't really expecting to make the finals. At the moment, they look a very potent combination, and Jeff White is a star.
The qualifying final against Carlton was one of the games of the year. Melbourne down by 31 points in the third quarter.
And he's marked it again. Well, he's been really the only forward for them.
Can he give them something? He's got about a metre of space to work in. Phoebe just got the ball where he needed to, and again, it's Green. This time, though, the angle is very, very tight.
Now the shot, son.
He stands with the margin at 15. And now it's reduced. What a kick from the young Brad Green. Allen, a handball. Watch out. He just got the handball away. It was great. McKay, well wrapped up. The pressure's starting to show. Bruce, can he kick a goal? He went quickly and kicks the goal. They're in it now. Oh, they are in it now. 4 points the difference at the MCG. Had to be one way or the other. The ball in the square and in the danger area.
Oh, Uze
has scored. They are in front.
Schwartz and Allen.
Carlton to win it, Dennis. They'll have to switch play.
Knocked out of there by Leon Shelley. Across the goal face, Bruce, an unlikely hero, the rookie. The rookie. Melbourne by 9 points. A pair of unlikely heroes embrace. Green and Bruce. Wait for the siren. The ball on the outer side. Great come from behind victory, Melbourne. D is for delighted.
A packed grand final week would begin with a traditional Brownlow medal count.
Melbourne, S.Y. Woden, 3 votes.
Woden kicks to the front. It's a goal. It's a goal from Woden.
Maybe Anthony McDonald could do something. Kicks it towards Woden. Takes a strong mark. So far, just one behind for the quarter. Woden, 45-degree angle, guides it through for their first goal of the term.
Melbourne, S.Y. Woden, 3 votes.
Pumps the ball back, Rigoni. Point of the square. Woden again, he's got it. The best midfield players in the competition this season. Been magnificent today. Can he finish it with a goal? He hammers it home.
Melbourne, S.Y. Woden, 3 votes.
Kick them wide. Steadying Woden. First goal of the match, yes! Rigoni, Woden rode the bump and kicked the goal. Great stuff. Woden within range from 50. They need a goal, Melbourne, and this is it. Well shepherded away, and that allows Nicholson to get clear, and Woden. This is where they're so damaging, almost unstoppable. You'd back him for his 4. Shane Woden.
Melbourne, S.Y. Woden.
Cameron Bruce is being picked up by Andrew Embley. The 232s on each other, and Bruce has kicked the last 2 goals of the game. Woden bursts out in the middle and burns off Cousins to kick another goal.
Melbourne, S. Powell, 1 vote. Melbourne, S.Y. Woden, 2 votes. Melbourne, A. Uze, 3 votes. And therefore I have much pleasure in declaring Shane Woden is the winner of the 2000 Brownlow medal.
Just the beginning of a frantic week for Danaher and his men. This is how the 7 Network saw the lead-up.
For the media, it's the last chance to talk to the players. After this, there's no interviews and the coach is the only spokesman. The full senior squad are training, but some, like Matthew Phoebe, have heavy hearts, knowing they won't be selected on Saturday. The fans, though, are practising with gusto. The Junction Oval hasn't seen this many people or had this much attention in years. What could be better for the Demons fans than a lamb chop and the chance to cheer on the boys? Joseph Gutnick knows he won't see the game, but he's seen enough to know he's got a good return on his investment. The only problems for the red and the blue, heavy rain and the fitness of Cameron Bruce. Both worries soon pass, Bruce included as both sides name unchanged lineups. Friday and the schools must be half empty. Children are everywhere as grand final week celebrations come to a spectacular end.
Yeah, it's been a big week. You know, start of the week was exciting. It's low key now, but this is the big one we've been waiting for. And experience with Schwarter, it's been great.
But I guess the dream's about running on down the race in the last game of the year. I guess that's what you dream about. That's what it's all about.
But it does take two to tango, and over the last 11 weeks, this team has won 10 games. They have been fantastic, the Demons, haven't they?
Rigoni's got Woden running through half-back. Under pressure, he gets his kick just in time. Towards centre wing, towards Peter Walsh. He needs support and he gets it. Up towards Schwartz. The Ox backs back into the pack. Couldn't take the mark. Robertson is waiting down, but he won't get a chance. Hardwick defends to the outer side. Only as far as McDonald. Now here's a chance for the knees of the player at Powell. Streaming towards goal. He shoots, and the Demons reply. Woden out of the middle.
Essendon started the game red-hot favourites. For Melbourne, it would be yet another near miss.
Hardwick was a flyer, but he couldn't take the mark. Solomon's been good. Neitz tries to keep it back in play. He gives it over the back. Here's a chance for the reply, and they get it straight away from Green. The youngster's done it again.
The 2001 season would be one of the most disappointing in years. There'd be some memorable moments, but the slide from premiership contender and grand finalists to also-rans and 11th place on the ladder, a bitter pill to swallow. There'd be some magnificent individual displays, Russell Robertson in high-flying form.
Did he use his hands? What a run.
Robertson! What a mark!
But off the field, things were grim. President Joseph Gutnick had fallen out with his lieutenants, his vice presidents Bill Guest and Ian Johnson, and high-profile board member and former state treasurer Alan Stockdale. In a mid-season political upheaval, they would all stand down. Gutnick replaced by Gabriel Zondi as president, but vowing to return to power.
Members will have their say. I shall return.
In July, 24 of the greats were inducted into Melbourne's Hall of Fame. One was named as a legend of the club, Norm Smith. Off a bad season, Melbourne would rebound in 2002. There'd be fresh faces, the old champs, and a rejuvenated approach. In the opening game of the season against Hawthorn, David Neitz gave just a taste of what was to come.
He's barged his way through. The big man, David Neitz, lead from the front. What a goal! Inspiring football by the Demons.
Just has to get it in there.
It's an open forward line for Neitz. Great play. The kick didn't quite hit the target and made it a lot easier for Mark Graham. That's a great effort from Neitz with the tackle, and it might cause a goal. McDonald runs in and kicks it. Scores a level. The game's still well and truly on.
Melbourne would farewell two veterans. Stephen Phoebe after 258 games, the third best tally in the club's history, and the Ox, David Schwartz, who would address his teammates.
It's so hard to say goodbye because I know once I leave, there's no return. I'll see you around. Thank you.
Melbourne's decision to sell its home games against Brisbane and play out of the Gabba had been received with some derision. In 2002, they would give the reigning premiers a 37-point start. They'd leave the Gabba with the money and the points.
They're running
White,
away with it now.
Walsh runs through the wing, kicks inside the 50. Guess who? And should he kick this? It's a long way back for the Lions. But still, plenty of time. Simply the way the game is being played. Neitz. Oh, that is as straight as you could wish. Straight through the middle. Neitz gets another one. Melbourne pull away.
The race for the Coleman medal was all but over by round 20. In his 200th game against the Bulldogs, David Neitz moved 16 goals clear.
On the full for David Neitz in game 200. And look at that. Right through the middle, and the Demons hit the front. 11 minutes into the third term.
Back in the finals and back in form against the Kangaroos, Melbourne looked premiership material.
After having chased long by Wheatley, they'll jump in the end. Uze! Keep it low. It's a goal. Uze has number 2.
The semi-final against road-weary travellers Adelaide was one of the most lopsided in history. The Crows booting 8 in the first quarter assault before Melbourne answered with 15 in the next 2. The 69-point turnabout would have a final twist as Adelaide regrouped and went on to win.
Uze's running. He's had one bounce, didn't come back to him. He's still got some time. Hard up against the bad look.
It would be the farewell appearance for Brownlow medalist Shane Woewodin. He'd be traded to Collingwood at season's end in the biggest sensation in AFL Trade Week. In an incredible start to the 2003 season, Melbourne produced one of the classic thrillers to steal the points against Hawthorn.
Has taken a mark. Or was it McDonald?
Robertson cleaned him up.
All players understand the urgency. Brown had no idea where it was. It come off his head, but he got it the second time. Kick has been marked.
But a point won't be...
Worst case scenario would, well, not worst case, but a very dangerous case scenario.
5 metres inside the boundary line. He's got to cover 40 in distance. That won't be a problem. Kick on its way to win the game for Melbourne. He has nailed it.
After winning only 2 of the first 6, Melbourne met Port Adelaide for a Mother's Day showdown at the MCG. Only 12,000 dotted around the vast stadium. By the halfway mark of the season, Neil Danaher openly admitted that his men had hit rock bottom.
Centre of the ground, pumps it long. High one. Jamar flies. In front, Wilson picked up Robertson. Bouncing, got his second.
By season's end, Melbourne had again failed to capitalise. They'd won 5 of 17 games and finished 14th. The club mourned the loss of Triple Premiership star and one-time games record holder Percy Beams, who died at the age of 92 in March 2004. Again, Neitz would get Melbourne off to a flyer. Against Richmond in round 2, he kicked 9 to move into second place on the club's all-time goal-kicking list behind Norm Smith.
51 metres out, it's on its way, it's good.
Melbourne looked terrific in 2004. Against Carlton, they'd produced their biggest win and highest score in 193 outings against the Blues. Cameron Bruce booting 7.
Towards Neitz, Thornton the spoil, Melbourne still dangerous, Bruce to try and find an opening court, Johnston for Davey, he's exciting, oh boy!
By round 18, they were on top of the ladder for the first time since 1994. 14 wins and 4 losses, and suddenly people were talking about Melbourne as the real deal.
Comes down towards their half-forward line, missed by Ward. Cleared a path for Bruce, goes to Johnston. Did he learn by his previous attempt? Yes, he did. Gets it.
Alas, it was not to be. 4 straight losses would see them miss a top 4 placing, then lose a nail-biter to Essendon. Skipper Neitz out with a broken leg. His stand-in, Adam Uze, superb in the crisis. The season ended with a whimper. Melbourne beaten by a kick, relegated to 5th place.
Kicked 1 goal in the 3rd quarter. He comes in, he's kicked it! The Demons back in front at the MCG. Wellman chips it out wide. Hurd and Broadbridge, the go-to man. James Hurd, what a mark.
We reckon that's probably just about do it. Oh, the man, James Hurd, he's done it. What timing!
We're not a premiership team, so it's not a wasted year. It's still a development year for us, and we come out of the year with a lot of lessons.
There'd be some joy, however, as Jared Rivers and speedster Aaron Davey produced a 1-2 finish in the prestigious Rising Star Award. The victory by Rivers anointing him as a star of the future.
In the piece, I'm not sure that we've had a unanimous winner before. We may very well have, but I think it's a fair indication of the sort of season you've had.
Yeah, mate, a bit lost for words at the moment, but yeah, no, it's good, it's great. You know, you see all the past players that have won this award, and it's just great to be up there trying to play some good footy like they have.
Melbourne's preparation for the 2005 season was shattered by the loss of Troy Broadbridge, a victim of the Boxing Day tsunami in Thailand. The 24-year-old had played 40 games for the Demons and was 8 days into his honeymoon when the disaster struck.
I'd say the emotion is still disbelief, I think. They're really flat. They're really concerned for Troy and Trish. Fortunately, Trish is recovering in hospital. We're concerned for her and Troy's family. So probably still disbelief.
As the club mourned a fine man and player, it went into the 2005 season with a steely resolve. In a blistering start to the season, it pummeled Essendon at the MCG.
Bruce with Neitz looking to lay an aggressive Shepherd and now receiving and giving it back to Uze, bending it back. He has done it. Oh, the Demons have kick-started their season.
The star of the early rounds, Cameron Bruce. After 3 rounds, he was unanimously judged best afield in all 3 games. There'd be time for celebration too, as the skipper became only the 5th player behind Flower, Steins, Phoebe and Dixon to reach 250 games.
I'm pretty hopeful I can reach the 300.
In 2005, Australia's oldest and proudest football club continues its search for excellence. Its bid to end a premiership drought stretching back 41 years. Perhaps it is the year of the red and the blue.